What was my favorite day in school? When the teacher said, field trip! By the time we're done here, we will explore a complete network environment to tie together the function of each device. Welcome to the tech floor of VIA, a managed service provider that actually provides IT services for a whole bunch of different customers. As I'm walking around here, you can see all the different cubicles of the technicians that work here. It's all empty right now because it's really early in the morning because I didn't want to disturb anyone, so I just came down when I figured nobody would be here. The main thing I want to show you is how the network comes together. So first of all, if you look up on the ceiling up there, we have a wireless access point. And if we were to remove that ceiling tile at the top of the ceiling, you would see a cable that goes into the main distribution facility, or MDF. That's where you store all of your primary connections, your primary network equipment, oftentimes the servers that power the site, all stored in the room designated as the MDF. Typically with a lot of cooling and fans and everything else. Around here, you can see the typical workstations. We've got voice over IP phones. If we flip each one of these behind, you can see there's actually two network connections that come in there. One going in from the wall jack, one going out from the phone to the computer. That's really common because when you install a new phone system that uses your data connections, your local area network, you don't usually want to run cables to all the different phones. So the phones will actually have a built-in switch. That's right, there's a switch built into the phone itself. Now, coming over here, I want to show you something else. This is an imaging shelf. This is when we get new computers in for our customers. We put them on the shelf and blast, or image is the technical word, a Windows platform on there with all the applications, all the plugins, everything else that's typically needed. I want you to see this. These are the switches that feed the imaging shelf. You can see all these different cables right here, all pre-prepared, where we can just simply put the laptops down, image them, and pull them off without having to run any cables and things like that. Now, these switches are not independent of themselves. They connect back to a wall jack, which also goes to the MDF. So if you really want to get the feel for how switching connects, whole bunch of switches. Those phones, the phones themselves are switches. Switches on the walls. We've got switches down there. We've got switches over in another suite that I'm not going to show you right now. I'll probably show you in another skill. But I want to walk in here with you and come around to the MDF. This is our mini MDF. Some of you may have been in MDFs that are huge with a ton of servers. And I want to show you this rack of equipment. So first of all, you see we've got a server. That feeds this site. We've got a UPS that needs a new battery because it tells me that on the screen. And right above that, you see all of the switches that actually feed this entire building. Now, you're probably not going to be able to see it too much, but behind here is a big wad of cable that's coming in, and that's what actually feeds into these patch panels. See these guys right here? That's what feeds the wall jacks. And all the patch panels is just a handy place to be able to take what comes in from the wall and plug it right into the switch. I mean, if I were to remove this, is our beautiful cable management that hides all the cable mess that has the connections from the patch panel down to the switch itself. Now, I can't reach there because it's pretty high, but those are just short little 1-foot cables that go in there, right? So all of the local area network communication is happening in those switches. Now, if I wanted to store something on this server right here, switch can do it. If I wanted to print something to the printer in the hallway, switch can do it. It's all local area network. Once it's time to leave, we send it right here to these routers. The routers are what determines if something should stay on the local network or if it should go to a remote network and then determine what that is. Here's what I mean. We actually have multiple connections coming in. This right here, beautifully mounted cable modem, is actually a cable internet connection. That feeds into the router. Down here is a backup DSL internet connection. That feeds into the router. Cable modem's a little bit faster. We prefer that one. DSL is the backup just in case the cable modem goes down. Over here is a Metropolitan Ethernet, or essentially a direct connection coming in from our data center. So literally, follow this line and you end up at a data center, not the internet at all, a whole bunch of servers that we manage for a lot of our customers. So how do you know? You know, if you're a network, how do you know whether to go to the data center, whether to go out on the backup DSL, whether to go out on the cable modem? That's all the job of the router. The router determines what those destinations will be and routes you to them accordingly. Now, that's all your job to configure that. That's why the job of a network engineer can be quite complex, is you have to put the rules in this router that tells all these different things, where to go, when to go there, if they're allowed to go there, so on and so forth. So that's a tour of the live network environment. Okay, one more thing I really want to show you. You're familiar with this office. This is my CBT Nuggets recording studio, but it's just one office in a suite of offices that feed back to that main MDF. I want to walk down this hallway with you to what we would typically call an IDF, an intermediate distribution facility, a place where essentially all the cables run as a secondary spot. Watch this, come on in. I'm going to walk into the IDF. You can see that this one is much more beautiful than the first one in the MDF I showed you, because I don't mean to brag, but I cabled this one myself. Matter of fact, if you go on CBT Nuggets and search for IT Expert Cabling, that's where I show you how to do all of the cabling, how to mount. I literally mount this rack on the wall, how to mount all the equipment the best. It's such a good series. You should watch it. But right here, you can see same kind of thing, all the patch panels coming in, although you can probably see the cables a little bit more coming in. These are all the cables that literally come in from the ceiling up there. You see that? That's the big bundle of cables that feed every wall jack in this facility, the separate suite. They come in right here as a big bundle, nicely, neatly wire tied together, into the patch panel. These are just dumb devices, right? That literally take the cable from behind and just patch it or connect it to the cable up front. Cable management falling off. These also, let me just take this off. These have all the little 1-foot cables that link it up here to the switches, switch 1, and down here, switch 2. What's missing from this rack? The router. There's no router that's sitting in here. That's because these feed directly over to the MDF, and that's where all the routers exist. So you can run switches across campuses, hundreds of switches, all tied together that end up exiting one point in the network, the router. The last thing that I want to do before we go is show you what you just saw in network diagram form. Throughout every video in this skill, I've been showing you the little icon that represents the physical device that we were talking about. And the reason for that is nobody wants to draw that full physical device when they're trying to describe what a network environment looks like. So this is what they do. The first place we started was the MDF, and in there you saw 2 switches. Now, you might look and go, well, that's a switch, why do they look different? Typically, when you're talking about a big network environment, the core switches are actually layer 3 devices. I know we haven't talked much about that yet, but it's a switch that is also a router. So for now, just remember the main switch of the network is typically a router as well, to figure out the different networks within the building. Again, more on that later, but that's why you'll start seeing icons like this in the diagram. Now you can see the connection over here to the suite I just showed you, the suite where my CBT Nuggets studio is at, is the layer 2 switches. Now look at the connections. I have redundant connections between the 2 switches. Why? Well, 2 reasons. One, if one of them goes down, I want to be able to fail over and use the other one. But the second, and probably the more important in these cases right here and right here, is because these are configured as a lag, or some vendors like Cisco calls them ether channel. Different words, same thing. That's a feature that you can enable on the switches where it combines the bandwidth of both of those connections into one. And that's great because a lot of times we have servers and a lot of things that use a lot of bandwidth connected up here and they're trying to access each other. Well, a whole bunch of, let's just say, 1 gigabit per second connections going through a 1 gigabit per second connection could become a bottleneck. Thus, adding bandwidth between the switches is a great thing. You can see that these switches have the connection to the 2 routers, and the 2 routers have the connection to the 2 ISPs. I left the Metro E Cloud off in this case because, well, it's too much for you to handle right now. We'll talk about that when we get into the skills related to advanced routing between offices and so on and so forth. So you also see now, we have more, but I just showed one in the diagram, a wireless access point that's connected to this switch right here, which extends that wired network into the air, allowing portable devices to be able to join it. So take just a moment. Let that settle in. Stare at that, go back to the video, look at the environment, because your ability to make a connection between what's physical and what's logical is a massive skill that you'll need as you progress in your network journey. You've now seen a complete network environment that ties together the function of each device. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.